Well, if you want to make a documentary and you're a BC or Alberta-based content creator, we have our StoryHive 100K edition currently open for intake. The 100K edition is open to mid-career filmmakers, and if you are a BC-based filmmaker, the great news is that you also may be eligible for a 20% top-up grant from Creative BC. And the fund is, when we say mid-career filmmakers, you need to be a Optic Local alumni or a StoryHive alumni or have 2 producer credits. And also, as part of the CRTC programming guidelines, you cannot have had a broadcaster license within the last 3 years. The StoryHive program is designed for the emerging filmmakers, and it's a $10,000 grant, and we run editions for StoryHive. So we just completed our StoryHive music video edition. So in terms of documentary filmmakers, we're constantly announcing new editions. So if you follow us on social or go to storyhive.com, we'll announce our editions, but currently it is the 100K edition. And what we say at StoryHive really is that we don't fund films, we fund filmmakers.
I think there's a million ways to finance your documentaries these days, from crowdfunding to more traditional way of doing it. I will mostly focus on the more traditional way to do it because that's what I know best. At the CMF, what you need to have to come to us is a broadcaster on board to trigger our funding. It's mandatory when you come to CMF that a broadcaster be attached, unless you do something directly for the web or for the other platforms.
Some of the projects that we do are what we call 100% NFB, so they're 100% financed by us as a public producer. And others are co-productions, both Canadian and international. In co-pro scenarios, we'll come up to a maximum of 49% of the financing, which allows the independent production partner to trigger the other pieces from the standard sources in the financial scenario. The way we work, I mean, it starts as a conversation with Shirley or with Terry Snellgrove, associate producer in the BC Yukon studio, who I see in the back there. And it's all about the story. What is the story you want to tell, and why do you want to tell it, and what's the approach? And as a public producer, you know, we're very situated on the auteur side of the spectrum. So we're looking for stories that, you know, come from that deep place of passion, something very original that you want to say. And typically the kinds of stories that might be a little bit harder to do in the conventional kind of commercial marketplace because of, you know, constraints around broadcast hours or storytelling conventions. So we're lucky as a public producer. We operate slightly outside of the commercial sphere, and that allows us to take risks on people and also to take risks in terms of story and form. Well, I think especially in documentary, I think it's important to look both at commercial distribution, like kind of the standard television distribution or the OTT distribution. But if there's a strong social issue anchor, which so often there is with documentary, it's so important to look at those kind of non-traditional distribution paths where you can partner with communities of interests, foundations, pre-structured groups that are really interested in the topic that your film is about and can use that film in order to further the work that they're doing.
Then you have the films of the week. Then you have all the different strands you see here. Yeah, here, that's, yes, yeah, that's good. Okay, and then down.
I think it's safe to say that distribution strategy is something that we want to start when we're coming up with a film as opposed to when a film is completed.
So we're all self-taught in terms of using VR as a tool. We've talked and worked and collaborated with people, including filmmakers, on you know, how to think about telling stories in VR and how to incorporate that into the design process. Making games is obviously a process unto itself, distinct from filmmaking. And what we found is that right now in gaming, but I think also for anybody who's working in VR, right now is a unique opportunity to kind of cross-pollinate ideas from different places. There's a lot for us to learn from filmmakers. I think there's probably a lot for filmmakers to learn from game developers.
If you just look at the evolution of screens, like the first screens we really had were kind of in a theater, right? And then we had the television, and then we had our smartphones. And if you notice the pattern, they're just getting closer and closer to our brain, right? So it's I think it's here to stay. It's not going to replace traditional documentary. Now that I've spent a ton of time in VR, I really appreciate when I'm watching a traditional film that has a frame and actually focuses my attention, right? With VR, there's a lot of additional cognitive energy that's required. You're looking around and there's a lot of stuff. And sometimes I just want a curated experience. Just let me relax and just feed me what I want to know, right? I don't want to have to work for it. Other times I do want to work for it, and it can be really rewarding. So I think they're both going to exist, coincide. What I think is that with the current state of VR, you have a lot of people from a film background doing VR film, and then you have a lot of people from a gaming background doing VR games. And that's just kind of natural, because that's where the talent is currently from. But eventually VR will find its own voice, its own medium that's unique to it, and we don't know what that is right now, and the technology is changing so quickly that it's hard to say exactly what it's going to be, but artists are just going to keep on experimenting until... In the digital studio, because we look at a variety of technologies as potential storytelling tools, we're always asking, why is this story best told in this particular platform, whether it's traditional video or VR or tablet or text message or whatever. I guess the power of VR is really in its sense of presence. So it makes you feel like you're there. And then if you can infer empathy from sharing the location of your subject, then it possibly amplifies that beyond what a 2D framed I guess experience could provide.
Where are the opportunities for storytellers, and especially with this kind of documentary lens in the future?
So some of the things that I look at thinking about that, there's an increasingly powerful and visible movement within games to make games that have a degree of meaning to society beyond just being a form of entertainment. The best opportunity here is to take the knowledge that game developers have in terms of engaging with people through their behavior in an interactive environment, and then layering that with the thing that documentary film does great, which is find underrepresented voices and give them a platform. And I think that's what I'm most excited to see with the fusion between game developers and documentary filmmakers. That's probably where the most powerful experiences will come from. Vancouver is one of the best cities in the world for this opportunity right now.
Vancouver's this great hub with the intersection of VFX, gaming, film, and really for VR to work, we're going to need those industries to converge, to get to know each other and work to create these VR projects, because no one industry is going to be able to do it all.
When I see what's done really well, it reminds me less of film and more of theater, where it's for example, there's no close-up in theater, but you still establish a sense of intimacy with the subject, and VR itself, it usually feels very theatrical. Like in a lot of really good games, it kind of feels like you're up on a stage while you're in the headset, interacting with the story around you, or even just watching the story, depending on how interactive or non-interactive it is. Okay, I mean this in all seriousness. The thing that I want to see is the stuff that I haven't imagined yet, that other people are thinking up. Yeah, that's my perspective as a game developer. I'm most excited by people who are gonna push the immersive nature of VR to its absolute limit and dream up stuff that literally isn't possible. Specific to you as filmmakers in the Doxa crowd, Dorothy Woodend, programming director on opening night, reminded us that Doxa is about troublemakers telling telling great stories that need to be told. And there are a lot of game developers out there that are troublemakers too, and they're looking for the right partner to make trouble. And you're the right partners.
Yeah, it was a 10-minute performance piece that was commissioned by the Cultural Olympiad back in 2010. So originally there was only 10 minutes. The title song, The Road Forward, was our performance. And it always had multimedia and archives in it as part of the weave of it. But it had a lot more choreography, as meaning it was really more theatrical. Versus more filmic. So yeah, and then it went on. We created a larger piece in 2013, workshop production at Push International Performance Festival, and then we premiered there in 2015 with a full ensemble. And John can probably speak to it too. It just takes so much pre-planning, so much detail, so much execution on the day, so many months in the editing room, as Jen Strom will know. And I think it's just so detailed that you're looking at things almost in a cellular way, like every moment, every frame, every note, every movement has to hit a certain thing. And you're trying to do that seamlessly. So it's by the time you get through all that, you're happy to be alive. That's really good. And then two, I think the experience of sharing your story is always extraordinary. You know, I slept all day yesterday from Thursday night. But I think because it's just so massive to finally expose a story that you've been working on and carving for a long time. And I think for a lot of Aboriginal peoples, that's a huge thing, to be able to see our own stories, to see how we, just who we are. I know that sounds maybe weird, but a lot of times we don't see our stories. So when we do, it's an overwhelming feeling to know that we're part of a universe that other people are also witnessing.
We set up this meeting and we had a discussion and we talked about a project. And I said, yeah, that's cool. Do you have anything else? And she said, well, I have this documentary musical. And then it was kind of like, yeah, now we're talking. And it literally was like that. And I mean, that was 3 years ago. I mean, Marie came to the table with a lot of other work that she had done as well, right? And one of the things that we're trying to do is work with artists, established artists, and how do they move into a different medium. And what an amazing opportunity to be able to take this project and go there with it. I mean, she had made films before, but now we're going into the world of being able to take everything that she knows how to do, but then really be there to try to lift it up and package it the time and just give it some love.
So, I mean, in terms of our discussion earlier about go back to the story, if you ever felt lost, did you feel like a daredevil yourself, being the third layer on this?
Well, I should have known, you know, Ken put 5 years of his life and kind of everything he had into the stunt, and Mark put 5 years of his life and everything he had into the album. So, of course, I assumed that I would finish the film on time and on budget, and I didn't. And there were many Ken Carter moments for me, or Mark Haney moments.
And the way we approached, you know, in the documentary and in telling the stories, performing the stories, like none of the ways we tell these stories is foreign to us, because it's in our tradition. We're so used to sharing these stories through song and through dance and through movement as traditional people. So everybody that was, even the documentary subjects and the crew, everybody has expressed their voice through music or song and dance in one way or another, whether it's been professional or it just comes from their community. So, I mean, that's how we opened our events. That's how we opened our like at the Vogue on Thursday night, we open up with song and dance, right? Because that's how we tell our stories, how we share our stories, right? That's our most powerful act of resistance, is to be able to do that through song and dance and music, right? That's why, I mean, our people...
We're all trying to get after some kind of truth, you know, and you don't want, you know, the truth, reality is, there's truth in reality, but you also don't want reality to get in the way of telling the truth.
When I was a young anthropologist, I deeply disliked what was called the film ethnographique. In France, in between the 60s and the 70s, the state gave funds for ethnographic films with well-known directors. I couldn't stand those boring films when I started. And at that time, I didn't know much about cinema because I didn't make any school. I come from the university. So I didn't know really what I wanted to do, but I knew really what I didn't want to do. A sync shot is filled with tons of information, and we don't need it all. To direct the gaze toward meanings or toward a special emotion, you have to get rid of all this extra stuff. You have to cut through it and find a form that leads to the deep end or goal. For me, each film must be a new writing challenge, otherwise I won't do it. Renoir said it's less urgent to do good films than to events cinema. I try to work to new process, aesthetic process, and fight against the too obvious meanings, ready-made thinking. And I try to go behind appearances to catch people mystery and complexity, avoiding explanation that kills cinema, even if it's a necessary evil. French documentary went in a new path. We had used to this television documentary 52 minutes, you know, La Pêche à la Sardine, or this kind of thing. And suddenly, he was at the bottom of a new age and saying that the statement was documentary cinema, which was completely new. And so that, therefore, we could try to present things that were new. And it was very, very good, very a great time. Now it's not the same anymore. No, I don't find it difficult because when you spend a lot of time with people, whatever is the situation, you're close. So you share, and when you share a fate with somebody, of course it's not the same fate, but I share a day-to-day life. Let's say it more simple. Then sharing makes you think of differently. When people are far from you and you see a war or you see children dying, it's more frightening than when it's very close, because you can share every single minute, you can know how to respond, you can act. So when you can act, then it hurts less.